He was just an old blind man crossing the street with his loyal service dog, until a cruel misunderstanding turned his routine walk into a national outrage. What happened next stunned the city and triggered a response no one saw coming. This is the story of Walter Green, a forgotten veteran who reminded everyone what honor truly means. "Sir, you're creating a public disturbance. I told you to stay on the sidewalk," the young officer yelled, his voice tight with adrenaline, just before the crackle and hiss of the taser. Walter Green, 78, blind and disoriented, cried out as the barbs hit, collapsing onto the crosswalk, his white cane clattering beside him. He'd just been trying to cross with the light, his old service dog, Shadow, whining in distress beside him. 7 minutes later, as paramedics attended to Walter, the wail of sirens was drowned out by a deeper, more ominous rumble. The intersection was suddenly, decisively filled with olive-drab military vehicles. If you believe those who've sacrificed sight for service deserve our utmost protection, not pain, type on or below. Walter Green navigated his world by sound, touch, and the unwavering loyalty of Shadow, his aging but still astute black Labrador service dog. Walter had lost his sight decades ago, not in a blaze of glory, but from a rare aggressive infection contracted while serving in a remote, disease-ridden jungle during a forgotten conflict. The army had done its best, but the damage was irreversible. He'd learned to live with the darkness, his other senses sharpening, his reliance on Shadow becoming absolute. Now 78, he lived a quiet, independent life in a small apartment. His days were structured by routine, walks with Shadow, visits to the local veteran center, listening to audiobooks. He was fiercely proud, rarely asking for help, managing his disability with a stoicism honed by years of military discipline and personal resilience. Today, he and Shadow were on their way to Walter's weekly volunteer shift at the public library, reading to children. It was a highlight of his week. They approached the busy intersection of Elm and 3rd, a notoriously difficult crossing even for the sighted due to fast-turning traffic and short pedestrian signals. Walter waited patiently for the audible pedestrian signal, Shadow sitting calmly at his side. When the chirping signal sounded, indicating it was safe to cross, Walter gave Shadow the command, "Forward." They stepped into the crosswalk, Walter tapping his white cane rhythmically, Shadow leading him with practiced confidence. Officer Grant and Officer Reed, 2 young patrol cops barely a year out of the academy, were parked just around the corner, finishing their coffee break. They were bored, restless, perhaps looking for a bit of excitement to break the monotony of their shift. They saw Walter and Shadow about halfway across the intersection. The pedestrian signal was already flashing "Don't walk," its audible clicks counting down rapidly. Cars were beginning to inch forward, impatient for the light to change. "Look at this old guy," Grant said to Reed, a smirk on his face. "Taking his sweet time. Gonna cause an accident. Probably drunk or on something," Reed added, equally quick to judge. Neither officer considered the white cane, the service dog vest, or the audible pedestrian signal that had clearly been active moments before. They saw an old man moving slowly, an impediment to traffic, a potential problem. Grant hit the siren briefly, a short, sharp yelp, then used his cruiser's PA system. "Hey, you in the crosswalk, get a move on. Lights changing." Walter, disoriented by the sudden blaring sound from an unexpected direction, faltered. He couldn't pinpoint where the voice was coming from. Shadow, startled, stopped, looking around nervously. "I said move it." Grant boomed again over the PA. "Are you deaf and blind?" Cars were now honking. Walter, confused and increasingly anxious, tried to urge Shadow forward, but the dog was now hesitant, sensing danger. Walter tapped his cane more rapidly, trying to reorient himself, his heart beginning to pound. He was directly in the path of oncoming traffic as the main traffic light turned green. "Wait a second. Tell us where you are watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this." "He's not complying," Reed said to Grant, reaching for his radio to call it in as a pedestrian obstructing traffic. "Looks like he's resisting." Grant, fueled by adrenaline and a misplaced sense of authority, made a split-second disastrous decision. He jumped out of the cruiser, drawing his taser. "Sir, stop resisting. Stay on the sidewalk. I warned you," he yelled. Though Walter was clearly in the middle of the street, disoriented, not resisting anything, he heard the shouting, felt the vibrations of the approaching cars, the panicked pull on Shadow's harness as the dog tried to move him out of danger. He was utterly confused, his carefully constructed world of sound and routine shattered by the aggressive, unseen commands. "I'm trying. I'm blind," he managed to call out, his voice thin with fear. But Officer Grant was already advancing, taser aimed. "Last chance. Get out of the road." Before Walter could react further, before anyone could intervene, Grant fired. The taser barb struck Walter in the back. He cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound of agony as 50,000 volts coursed through his frail frame. His legs buckled. He collapsed onto the asphalt of the crosswalk, his white cane flying from his grasp and skittering under a car. Shadow, though terrified, stayed by his side, barking frantically, nudging Walter's face, trying to rouse him. Officer Reed rushed forward, not to help Walter, but to secure the resisting suspect, pulling Walter's arms behind his back to handcuff him as he lay spasming on the ground. Onlookers gasped. Cell phones were already recording. A woman screamed, "He's blind, you idiots. He's got a service dog. What are you doing?" The paramedics and a police supervisor, Sergeant Torres, arrived within minutes, summoned by bystanders and Reed's earlier call about an obstructing pedestrian. Sergeant Torres, an experienced officer, took one look at the scene, the elderly man on the ground, the taser wires, the distressed service dog, the horrified onlookers, and her face hardened. She immediately ordered the handcuffs removed and began administering first aid while calling for an ambulance. "What in God's name happened here, Grant?" she demanded, her voice like ice. Grant, now looking less confident, stammered about non-compliance and public safety. Reed looked pale and shaken. As the paramedics began attending to Walter, who was groggy and in considerable pain, a series of urgent, discreet phone calls were being made by witnesses. One was from a retired Army colonel who happened to be having coffee at a nearby cafe and saw the whole incident unfold. He knew exactly who to call when a veteran, especially a blind one, was mistreated. He dialed a number that bypassed usual channels, a direct line to a liaison at the Regional Joint Military Command. 7 minutes. That's how long it took from the moment Walter Green collapsed on the crosswalk to the moment the familiar urban soundscape of Elm and Third was fundamentally altered. First came the distant, then rapidly approaching distinctive rumble of heavy diesel engines, not the high whine of police cruisers or ambulances, but something deeper, more resonant, more powerful. Then the lead vehicle appeared, an olive-drab Humvee, its lights flashing, not with civilian urgency, but with military precision. It didn't slow for the existing police perimeter. It drove right through it, forcing surprised officers to scramble out of its way. It stopped, angling itself to block one entire approach to the intersection. Immediately behind it, another Humvee did the same on the opposite side. Then a larger troop carrying LMTV, light-medium tactical vehicle, rumbled into position, effectively sealing off the third approach. Within 60 seconds, the entire busy intersection was under an impromptu, unofficial military lockdown. Soldiers in combat fatigues carrying sidearms disembarked from the vehicles, taking up calm, observant positions, not aggressively, but with an air of absolute unshakable control. They didn't interfere with the paramedics attending to Walter, but their presence was a powerful, silent statement. Sergeant Torres, the police supervisor, stared in disbelief, her radio crackling with confused calls from dispatch about unauthorized military vehicles blocking a major city artery. Officer Grant and Officer Reed looked like they had seen ghosts, their faces ashen. The civilian onlookers were stunned into silence, phones still recording, but now with a sense of awe and trepidation. This was no ordinary response. From the lead Humvee, a figure emerged, tall, ramrod straight, wearing the crisp duty uniform of a United States Army 4-star general. His chest was adorned with an impressive array of ribbons. It was General Nathan Rourke, commander of the entire Regional Army Forces, a man known for his decisive leadership and fierce loyalty to his soldiers, past and present. He had been at the nearby military base for a staff meeting when the urgent call about Walter Green, a name he knew well from veterans' honor rolls and disability advocacy reports, had come through. General Rourke strode purposefully toward the center of the intersection, his aides scrambling to keep up. He ignored the police officers, his gaze fixed on the scene where Walter was being carefully lifted onto a stretcher, Shadow whining softly beside him, held gently by a sympathetic paramedic. The general reached Sergeant Torres. "Sergeant," he said, his voice calm but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "I am General Rourke. What is the status of Sergeant Walter Green?" Sergeant Torres, though experienced, was visibly taken aback by the general's sudden appearance and the overwhelming military presence. "General, sir, Mr. Green is stable, conscious. He appears to have been tased by one of my officers during a pedestrian stop. Paramedics are transporting him to City General for evaluation." The general's eyes, like chips of ice, flickered toward Officer Grant and Officer Reed, who were standing stiffly looking terrified. "Tased?" General Rourke repeated the word, flat, devoid of inflection, yet heavy with unspoken condemnation. For what offense, Sergeant? Did your officers deem it necessary to use a taser on an unarmed 78-year-old blind man attempting to cross the street with his service dog? Sergeant Torres, to her credit, didn't try to prevaricate. Sir, the initial report was pedestrian obstructing traffic, resisting instruction. However, based on witness statements and the obvious presence of Mr. Green's white cane and service animal, it appears a catastrophic error in judgment may have occurred. An error in judgment, General Rourke echoed, his voice still dangerously quiet. He then looked directly at Grant and Reed. Officers, did either of you identify yourselves clearly before engaging Mr. Green? Did you ascertain his disability? Did you offer assistance as per both police protocol and common human decency when you saw an elderly blind individual apparently disoriented in a busy intersection? Grant stammered. Sir, he wasn't responding to commands. He seemed agitated. Agitated? The general cut him off. Perhaps because he was blind, confused by your blaring PA system, and in danger of being run over, moments before one of you shot him with 50,000 volts? He took a step closer. Sergeant Walter Green lost his sight serving this country in a place most people couldn't find on a map. He has navigated this city independently for decades with his service dog. What he encountered today was not a public disturbance. It was a failure of observation, a failure of training, a failure of empathy, and a gross abuse of authority. Your actions, officers, have not only harmed a decorated veteran, they have brought profound discredit upon your department and endangered the public trust. The general turned back to Sergeant Torres. Sergeant, I expect a full and transparent investigation into this incident by your internal affairs, and I will be requesting a parallel investigation by the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. My office will be monitoring both closely. He then gestured to one of his aides, who stepped forward with a satellite phone. I am also formally requesting that the mayor and the chief of police meet me at City General Hospital within the hour to discuss this department's training protocols regarding interaction with disabled individuals, particularly disabled veterans, and the appropriate use of force. Sergeant Torres nodded, her face grim. Understood, General. We will cooperate fully. The general then walked over to the ambulance just as they were about to close the doors with Walter inside. He leaned in. Walter, Sergeant Green, it's General Nathan Rourke. Can you hear me? Walter, though pale and clearly in pain, managed a weak nod. General Rourke, what? Don't you worry about a thing, Walter, the general said, his voice softening considerably. You're in good hands now. We'll take care of everything. You just focus on getting checked out. Shadow will be looked after, right beside you. He gently patted Shadow's head. And those officers, he added, his voice hardening again, just enough for the nearby cops to hear, will be held accountable. He stepped back, and the ambulance pulled away, its siren now a mournful sound. General Rourke watched it go, then turned to face the still blocked intersection, the stunned police officers and the silent, watching crowd. His message, delivered without shouting, had been clear. An injustice against one veteran was an injustice the full weight of military concern might address, especially when that veteran was one of their own. Sightless, but not unseen, the city was about to learn a very hard lesson about looking out for its heroes. The fallout was swift and severe. The mayor and chief of police did indeed meet General Rourke at the hospital, emerging hours later, looking visibly shaken and promising immediate comprehensive reforms. Officers Grant and Reed were suspended without pay, pending the outcome of multiple investigations. Footage of the incident, captured by numerous cell phones, flooded social media, sparking outrage and condemnation. The police department, facing immense public pressure and the unblinking scrutiny of General Rourke's office, fast-tracked a new training program focusing on de-escalation techniques and interaction with individuals with disabilities, with a specific module on identifying and assisting veterans. Walter Green recovered from the physical effects of the tasing, though the emotional trauma lingered. General Rourke personally ensured he received the best possible follow-up care, and that Shadow was also checked by a veterinarian and comforted. The veterans community rallied around Walter, providing support and solidarity. The story served as a stark, painful reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by disabled veterans and the critical need for better training and accountability within law enforcement. The image of military Humvees blockading a city street to address an injustice against a blind veteran became an iconic symbol of advocacy and the enduring bond among those who served. General Rourke, in a later quiet conversation with Walter, simply said, "No one gets left behind, Walter, not on my watch, not ever. You spent your life navigating darkness for us. The least we can do is make sure your path is safe now." And for a while, at least in that city, the path for vulnerable citizens became a little clearer. a little safer, all because one blind veteran's mistreatment brought the quiet thunder of military concern to a standstill at Elm and 3rd. Because when you harm one who has already sacrificed so much, you may find yourself facing an army of support you never anticipated. Subscribe to this channel if you believe our most vulnerable veterans deserve our fiercest protection, and that accountability is paramount.